Welcome to Beacon of Creation, a weekly podcast on game design through the lens of Magic the Gathering. I'm Tim.
And I'm Mono Whiteboarder, also known as Peter.
We are all the way on that lens of Magic the Gathering this week because we're talking not just about Magic, but the kind of phases of Magic, like the steps you take in the turn.
Well, yeah, we're getting into the nitty gritty of Magic.
Yeah.
And study up because Layers is next week.
Oh, wow. We're doing a Layers Ep someday. I feel like I could hang in a Layers Ep, though I don't know it that well off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. Should we do like a rules quiz episode? Would that be fun? I don't know.
We're live pitching episodes right now instead of
yeah. If you want to be on the Layers Ep, let me know and I'll get you on the schedule. So we had a message come in for Xena.
Yeah, I think this was like an uncard they were designing, and then they had some rules clarification to go with it.
The rules text here is combat is now simultaneous. Done. What's important is the reminder text. So combat is now simultaneous. This means each player writes down attackers, then reveals them simultaneously. They're tapped as normal. Then each player declares blockers and reveals them simultaneously. Creatures that both attack and block receive damage as normal, but deal damage once as a blocker and once as an attacker. So if you die as a blocker, you don't deal your attacking damage. Does that sound right to you?
That would make sense to me.
Okay.
It's very like uneasy rules text, right? This reminds me of the rules lawyer card. That's state-based actions don't apply, and then it has all the clarification reminder text of what the hell does that actually mean.
Yeah. All right, let's walk through this a little bit more. Yeah, the rules lawyer has a lot more reminder text. Don't lose for having 0 less life. Creatures aren't destroyed due to damage or death touch and aren't put in the graveyard due to having 0 less toughness. Blah, blah, blah. But anyhow, for the Xena rule here, so if I attack with 2 creatures,
so we're both attacking. We both enter the declare attacker step at the same time.
You have 2 creatures. I have 2 creatures. They're tapped as normal, so they won't be able to be declared as blockers if they're tapped. If they have Vigi, right. All things are out the way. But
that's why there's that clarification text of both attack and block.
Yeah. Okay. So if there's no vigilance involved, we both have 2 2/2s. We both attack, or both reveal our intentions to attack. Then this is why are you laughing? This is serious. We need your game face right now.
We both reveal our intentions to attack.
Yeah.
Now we attack. Now our triggers go on the stack.
Yeah. So the attacking triggers then go on the stack. Anyone wants to cast something during declare attackers, that would still happen. Mm-hmm. But then when we go to block, we also have to write down like my creature is going to block that. My creature is going to block that. My other creature is going to block that. And then we reveal those. You get to do things as normal, and then damage happens. So all that seems, except for where we place that combat. Is the combat during a person's turn? Is it a separate person's turn? Mm-hmm. Like, besides those questions, which are questions, but we'll put them aside for now. So far, I think this is cohesive. How do you feel?
Have you ever played Diplomacy?
I have not played Diplomacy, but I have heard of it.
Diplomacy is like a risk-alike game. But instead of dice randomly deciding the outcome, players make decisions. Everybody writes their move, and you kind of submit them, and then the moves all happen at the same time. You can also play like online, and then the computer does all the moves for you. That's like the really common way to play. Like if you want to go super old school, you can like telegram in your moves to one master, game master, who then moves all the board and tells everybody the update positions. But that's what this reminds me of, is that diplomacy style. Hey, let's all do a combat at the same time.
Yeah. If we could find a place to put this combat event, so far I think I'm pretty on board. Like I think this is like a reasonable variant. Let's think about the vigilance thing so we can get this last rule out of the way, and then we'll think some more about overall what we might do. Creatures that both attack and block receive damage as normal, but deal damage once as a blocker and once as an attacker. So if I attack with like a vigilance creature, I'm attacking, and that's fine. If I also want to block while I'm attacking, I have to deal my blocking damage or be dealt block. The attacker gets to deal me blocking damage, and I have to survive that before I get to deal my attack damage. How do you interpret that? Or do I get to do both, but we're just ordering it for fun?
I think the way Xena is saying it, you would do both. So I think the way Xena applied the rule, creatures that both attack and block receive damage as normal, but deal damage once as a blocker and once as an attacker. So I think that you would still deal the damage.
Okay. It's sort of saying vigilance creatures get to deal double damage almost.
Exactly.
But not to the same thing.
And like theoretically, then if your vigilance attacker isn't blocked, they deal damage to the player and then also deal damage to the creature they blocked. If they're attacked and they are blocked, they deal damage to 2 creatures. Yeah. Obviously, this makes vigilance a lot stronger, but here at Beacon, we are the #1 vigilance podcast on the internet, so we are totally behind that. Very smart, Xena.
I guess there are cases where like a creature might attack and block the same other creature. Like if you had 2 vigilance creatures, they could ride across the battlefield. We might finally have a black knight and a white knight that like do combat in the middle of the battlefield.
It is kind of funny to think about like the 4-player game, and like that would just be a mess. Like combat would take forever to sort out. So you have everybody super long, obnoxious turns. Man, maybe I've been talking to Red Bay a little bit too much, and he's got me down on the multiplayer variants. You got everyone's long turns, and then also this long 5th combat step. I'm picturing this as like everyone takes their untap, upkeep, main phase, second main phase, end step. Everyone does that, and then after everyone's completed that, then the combat turn happens. It's combat turn now instead of combat phase.
Okay. Yeah, then you maybe take turns taking your first main phase. And then once all of the first main phase is complete, then we move to the combat event. Then we all go in reverse order, snake draft style, through our main phases.
Yeah, now we're cooking.
And then the entire turn order like clicks one over so that the person who went first now goes second, or now goes fifth. The first person who goes second now goes first. And then, we do a whole first main phase combat event.
You'd have to create one of those tiles. They do it in like poker has the dealer tile that goes around. Okay. Or Wingspan has a player one tile. Yeah, you'd have to pass that around so everyone knows whose turn it is. How many turns have we got around the board?
I don't know. That's not the most inconceivable thing. For multiplayer combat, you could go like Emperor style or something, where you can only address your neighbors, and that might like lower the complexity. It's kind of a thrill as to who's it's like a little more jockeying before the combat event, so you have to think a little harder about what everyone's going to commit to. If you give everyone a clipboard, maybe they just write down what they it's not actually too bad to write down what they're attacking with.
Yeah, you're going to go through so much paper doing the combat simultaneously because you're noting everything and then revealing it simultaneously.
Yeah. Well, we'll have recycled pulp. We'll make it eco-friendly.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Very good. It's something I've been thinking about for a while, ever since I played this game called Kinfire Delve.
What is that game? Kinfire Delve.
Kinfire Delve. It is reminiscent of the Marvel Legendary game, where that game is a deck builder. But instead of having to build your deck, everyone just gets handed a pre-constructed deck. And you're all on a team, and you play through and you fight like there's a boss, and you all have your hand of spells, and you try and work together to fight the boss.
It's like 4 players against a boss or something.
Exactly. And Kinfire Delve is unique because you have to go through the dungeon first. And so you kind of lose some resources going through the dungeons like you would in a D&D campaign. And so you're a little bit weaker when you fight the boss, which stood out to me because when I play these games, I play with a bunch of Magic players. And my experience with this type of game, the pre-constructed deck where you play against a enemy kind of NPC style deck, is they are way too easy. Like we will put it on the hardest difficulty right away, give the boss as many bonuses as possible, and we will just completely destroy them. And I'm like, what is going on with this game? But Kinfire Delve stood out because it was actually like really hard. And the reason it is because to create that experience of like losing resources as you try and fight through the dungeon, there's no draw step, which is very different from a lot of these games that replenish your hand at the end of turn. And that kind of got me thinking, well, what if Magic didn't have a? What if we took the draw step away from Magic? Just removed it completely.
It's just your starting hand. Say
so
that a
you
little clearer.
have your starting hand, and then like you can maybe use divination to draw cards, so you could still cast divination like normal. And then you might have to have some sort of like mechanic built into the game that allows you to draw cards somehow. In Kinfire Delve, there's like abilities that people can use to draw cards, and then you can also like take on a penalty to like do a rest, and you get like slightly cursed, and then you're able to replenish your hand. But like replenishing your hand is a steep cost, and you can't do it that frequently.
With Kinfire, this is like I think I've played Sentinels of the Multiverse. Is a similar game.
Yep, yeah,
it's sort of like off-brand Avengers.
Mm-hmm.
Even like Gloomhaven is a little bit like this, though it has a minis component. The like difficulty in reloading your hand is very Gloomhaven.
Mm-hmm. Sentinels has that like you draw back up to your max hand size at the end of your turn or something.
Yeah, that one you're playing a lot.
Which made the game feel a lot easier.
Yeah, a little super heroic. I always get to do a bunch of stuff all the time. All right, so before we like get into too many of those variants, I also wanted to like get us all locked in on what the actual steps and phases are. Like, what's the difference between a phase and a step? Which are the steps and phases? Blah blah blah. Is this a useful thing to think about? Is this kind of outdated? Did they get it exactly right when they made Magic 30 years ago? So there are 4 different phases, but really 5 phases to a turn. There's the beginning phase, first main, combat, second main, and end phase. I guess like the second main I think is always the funniest sounding one. Like the same phase that you get to do another phase but later. But let's go top to bottom here. Why don't you run it down, and then we'll give our ideas as we go.
So the beginning phase is if you've been playing Magic a long time, you're probably very familiar with it now. It's that untap, upkeep, draw.
Yeah.
And it's in that order. You're going to untap all your permanents. Any effects that happen during your upkeep will then trigger, and then you have a brief moment where you can react and cast spells, specifically usually instants or cards with flash. And then the draw phase or the draw step that just draw one card. And once again, there's that brief moment where you can cast an instant.
Yeah. I guess the kind of funny technology that's built into the untap step, which is like things happen during untap, but you're not allowed to do anything about it. This is similar to cleanup, really. But like that technology was never applied to like other parts, like upkeep or whatever else. You're allowed to react as someone tries to leave upkeep, as someone tries to leave the draw step. A lot of times that creates like a weird flow to the game where like normally no one is reacting to anyone's upkeep step. But then like one time someone has to like lean forward a little bit, but not say anything, not indicate anything. And then like as someone's turn passes, they've basically drawn their cards like, wait, in your upkeep, put the card down. I'm going to cast this thing.
I think this is probably the hardest like phase for new players to understand and grasp.
Yeah.
The classic thing is doing them all out of order. So like you draw a card, then you untap all your permanents and stuff. You have the like people doing stuff in your upkeep. A lot of players are just like, well, the upkeep's just here to have this trigger that goes on the stack where my dude creates a 1/1, you know? Even like, I'm not sure how like easy it is for a new player to grok, like at the beginning of your upkeep, do this.
Yeah.
But like, as you get further into your Magic playing career, I guess you tend to, that's when you start pulling out these tricks, and it feels close to cheating when you're playing against a new player and you're like, I'm going to do something. This is after so you drew your card, and now I'm going to play my Vendilion click, and now I get to look at the card you drew and all of your other cards too. That kind of thing.
Yeah, but before you're able to cast any sorceries or anything. Yeah.
Yep.
And like upkeep as a step name is also, I would say, basically out of date and obsolete. Like upkeep was a thing they were experimenting with some early cards, like a Force of Nature or whatever. You had to pay 4 mana during your upkeep to keep it around. Lord of the Pit, something like that. But upkeep as the time in your turn where you pay the upkeep costs of things, like basically doesn't exist in Magic. Upkeep is more just like, here's a step that is like the beginningest part of the turn that things can be responded to. So like during your upkeep, you may pay 2 mana. If you do, draw an extra card and lose 2 life or whatever. So, its ability to be relevant as a thing called upkeep is like pretty low now. Though maybe there's some cool things about like being able to do things before main phase, before sorceries. Maybe that's still like pretty desirable. We're sort of going without saying so far that like it doesn't make a ton of sense to like completely redo Magic rules right now. Like we're a little too far in for that to like actually happen. But we're speculating about like how useful those things actually are, and you can always try to play some sort of variant or something where you word things a different way. All right, so the next phase that we got here is the first main phase, where now you're allowed to do sorcery speed things, play lands, use planeswalkers, cast any instance if you want to, but sorceries, creatures, all that kind of stuff.
It's where most of the magic in Magic the Gathering happens, I'd say. Especially, once again, newer players, you're going to usually do everything during the first main phase. You're going to cast your creatures, play your land, basically get yourself ready to fight your opponent in the combat step.
Some main phase things you could do in your second main just as well, like usually casting your creatures are going to be things that you could do either first or second main phase. It's a strategy thing that is maybe satisfying that you should not cast a lot of your creatures shouldn't be cast in first main phase. They should be cast in second main phase. So your opponent has to guess more during combat. You're not tapped out during combat. So there's probably still a lot of value in having split main phase, but it is something that people talk about. Could you have just one main phase? You could put it after combat. You could put it before combat, wherever you want to stick it.
Magic kind of is almost in the middle of like general trading card games. I think a lot of them are like you cast all the spells you want to cast and then go to combat. And that's very like clear and kind of linear. You can't use hidden information, which I think makes the game a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
And then you have the extreme other end of the spectrum, which is like everything's kind of happening together. Like, oh, I'm going to attack here, then I'm going to cast a spell, then I'm going to attack again, then I'm going to cast 2 more spells, and then I'm going to pass my turn.
So main phase, you don't see a lot of games with split main phases, with 2 main phases, that kind of thing. Usually they want to keep it to like 4 steps that all happen in a row. But maybe part of what we're trying to do with Magic is we want to have the opportunity to make it as uncertain as possible what's in my hand. We need you to have a lot of different chances to play your instant, to be as tricky as possible, play your flash creature. By having a main phase where you could do a bunch of your stuff and not doing anything during that phase, like that's like part of what's cool. Like, I'm going to untap, draw, pass. Like I'm going to play on your turn. I'm going to do stuff on your turn. That's like very Magic. There's not a lot of games try to do that, for better or worse. If we're trying to accentuate the magicness of Magic, like having the ability to use things at different parts during a turn, and your opponent knowing more or less about your turn because of what you're doing, is part of what's fun. And sometimes, there are some creatures that need to be in the first main phase. You can't have combat first because otherwise haste isn't really a thing. Otherwise, like an ETB that bounces a creature isn't really a thing. So having something before combat is pretty important.
Yep. So after the first main phase, you go into combat. I think we often don't think of combat as having all of these very specific steps. I don't know. Maybe combat's the most organic part of the phases of Magic the Gathering. You have entering combat, which is like at the very beginning, people have a chance to react and do something. A lot of times this is used for crewing vehicles. Then after you enter combat, if everyone passes, you declare attackers. There's another space for people to respond to stuff. Then now that the attackers are declared, the opponent can declare blockers. You have the first and double strike damage step. Then you have the regular combat damage step. And then you have an end of combat. So before you go into your second main phase, after all the damage is done, there's this end of combat step.
Yeah, we kind of famously used to have like damage on the stack. So like the combat damage step used to be something that was more interactive. The terminology that the comprehensive rules use is one that I always love the specific language they have. All combat damage that has been assigned is dealt simultaneously. This is a turn-based action that doesn't use the stack. No player has a chance to cast spells or activate abilities between the time combat damage is assigned and the time is dealt. There used to be a window in between there, which we got rid of. A couple cards got a little worse, and Magic overall got a lot better. I guess we had sort of a change to the previous part of the combat damage step, where if you were double blocked, you would choose the damage assignment order.
Yep.
And now you just choose how to assign damage. So it's a little bit different than it used to be.
I had to clarify that ruling for a couple different friends who played Magic for a long time, they're like, why is this relevant? And I'm like, it's this very specific situation in which you're double blocking and have a combat trick.
Yeah. It's the type of thing that, like, I don't think that people loved the conga line of doom rule when that was introduced. And I think this new one is just like flat, like just more obvious, more plain.
Yeah. It's a classic rule that actually doesn't impact most people's day-to-day like playing of the game.
Yeah. It makes it clear, I think.
But is substantially easier to play the game.
I mean, I've played with people who have played, 50 Commander games in their life.
Yep.
I tend to be a technical player. I try to not be a nitpicker, but I think it's sometimes kind of fun about Magic to like, hey, let's learn these rules a little better. So someone double block or I double block someone, and then like I have some things that I may or may not do. Who knows? I say, okay, how do you want to order the blockers? And they're like, order the blockers. What does that mean? Like you could be many games into Magic and still not have really done that as a new or intermediate player.
You phrase it as it's fun to get into the nitty gritty of the rules, and I phrase it as like I just hate whenever I'm explaining something to somebody and I feel like I'm cheating. And
okay.
That was definitely one of the how do you want to order the blockers feels like I'm cheating.
Yeah.
And now I don't have to feel that way anymore.
Yeah, and could you make this clearer? Still keeping the magicness, and I think that the change to combat damage assignment actually achieves that pretty well. You've made it clear, and it's still plenty magic-y. There's still combat tricks involved, all that kind of stuff. I guess the other funny thing here, like you say that you kind of blow through these combat phase, the steps of the combat phase. I feel like they're like tattooed on my chest. So if I look backwards, so I look in the mirror and I can like review them. And maybe because I just love all this minutia, like it kind of like entertains me when I get to, do something that I don't normally get to do, like take an action during end of combat. A creature is still an attacker, so I can deal 3 damage to target attacker or blocker. Everyone's already dealt their damage. Like, what? Why is that legal? Guess what it is. That's just how it works.
Tim, you're talking to a white mage here. I know the end of combat step. I've played my fair share of reconnaissances.
There you go.
Reconnaissance eye.
Yeah, remove target attacking creature you control from combat and untap it. So this is like retroactive vigilance, is what you're saying?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you wait till the end of combat, and you wait, like, your creature's going to win. So you have a 1-1. Their 1-1 is blocking your 2-2.
Yeah.
So your 2-2 is going to win the fight. So you want it to deal the damage. You want it to be in combat. But at the end of combat, it's still attacking. So then you untap it.
There you go.
And then you feel like you're cheating, and you have to explain that you're not.
When I was looking this up, I remembered that I played against this kind of recently because it was in the Assassin's Creed set. They put reconnaissance in there.
Yeah, of course.
They got a crucial reprint in. Keeping the price down so people like you can continue to play reconnaissance.
Yeah, thank God.
On a budget.
There's a sweet secret lair drop of reconnaissance too.
Actually, that is sick. I'm a sucker for those movie.
Yeah, me too.
Horror movie posters. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you leave main phase. People can respond to you leaving your main phase, right? Everyone gets priority leaving any person's main phase. Oh. Then we have the entering combat step, or the beginning of combat step, I guess you'd say. And people can do things there. They could say like, okay, we're actually in combat now. Let me tap your attacker so you can't attack. Let me crew my vehicle. Let me do whatever else. Entering combat like can also feel like kind of a gotcha. Like I can already respond when we're leaving the main phase. Why do I also get to respond when we're entering combat? There are some cards that say, hey, at the beginning of combat, create a 1/1 attacking creature. There are, cards take advantage of that step existing. But it is a little nitty. I think that, how do you feel about like declare attackers, declare blockers, everyone getting priority? Do you feel good about that?
Yeah, I think I do. Which one do you use more often? Like, I declare attackers, and then basically the only reason priority is used there is because then I want to flash in my blocker.
Yeah.
That feels kind of like an important part of Magic because there are these like surprise blockers that you want, and that's the only time you can have that window.
Kind of an ambush. Yeah, that feels kind of important.
Yeah, and then the declare blockers is obviously important because that's when you have your combat tricks hit. So it's like, it's not telegraphed what these specific things are for, but like there is a specific reason that both of these exist, which in some ways feels very inelegant, but you also kind of need them there for these like key, very Magic feeling events to happen.
End of combat. I don't know what the justification for end of combat is, except maybe that it always existed. I don't know. Are there some classic end of combat activities to take?
So I think the end of combat step exists purely because once damage we're in the combat damage step. Damage happens.
Yeah.
And then all of the triggers from things dying actually happen at end of combat. Is that right?
I think things that like trigger from creatures dying would still happen during combat damage step. I'm double checking that.
That's also very important. That's also something we should not get wrong.
Everyone gets to do something. I declare blockers, everyone gets to do something. Damage happens. It's not interactive, but damage happens. And then everyone gets to do something again. And then, triggers happen again. So the end of combat is not really necessary for negotiating those things.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So what is the purpose of the end of combat? Just to allow for weird rules finagling? Allow me to reconnaissance my creature that dealt damage?
Yeah. Are there many effects that say like until end of combat? I'm trying to think of an effect that would be like that.
Oh, you know what does exist is Conqueror's Galleon has a end of combat trigger. If it survived combat, it flips over.
Oh.
When Conqueror's Galleon attacks, exile it at end of combat, then return it to the battlefield transformed under your control. So that is using the end of combat.
That is before main phase, yeah. Interesting.
So I guess it has a purpose. It's something where you want the card to prove that it can survive a combat in which it attacked or blocked, I guess.
I'm looking at end of combat now. I'm feeling excited. There aren't that many cards. No. There are 18 cards, but they cross history as well. This 2 different Transformers cards that say end of combat. Sort of the philosophy that maybe guides the beginning phase as well. Any draw triggers, whenever you draw a card, when you draw your first card of the turn, you may reveal it. We want that to all be done and resolved, all the triggers to be done before we actually enter main phase. We don't want there to be like spillover.
Mm-hmm. We may need to move off this pretty quickly, Tim, because you know you're in a bad spot when you're on the MTG fandom wiki page for banding.
Oh,
because I'm wondering if the end of combat and banding have any relationship. When does my creature stop being in a band?
I cooled on it for a little while, but I have to say I'm 100% back on board the Resleevables podcast. They migrated to YouTube. That was a difficult transition for me. They don't do audio podcasts anymore. And they do a set-by-set thing, which is fine, is good. But what I have to heartily recommend is their tournament series, where they play the championship match for every major tournament, like the World Championships and the Pro Tours. Because you will see, I just recently watched a video where multiple bands attacked at the same time, and it was
hell yeah,
hyper relevant that they were banded. So like if you need banding in your life, if you want like honest banding played earnestly, that's where you're going to find it.
if you want honest banding played earnestly, put that on a t-shirt.
Absolutely, yeah.
He has a apparel company.
Yeah.
He can do it.
Yeah, that's true. So there's an old card Jade statue. I guess it's old and that's why it takes advantage of this, but it says you pay 2 mana, it's an artifact that's not a creature, but you pay 2 mana and sort of it becomes a creature. It becomes a 3/6 artifact creature until end of combat. Activate only during combat. Is that thrilling at all that like this creature can only ever exist during combat? It cannot exist outside of combat.
It doesn't feel thrilling.
Okay.
It feels like a weird way to navigate being slightly harder to kill.
You can use this in your board wipe deck. You can attack with it. It turns out of being a creature fast enough for you to second main phase and things.
I want the deck to exist where I'm a combo that goes off. I have infinite mana, and I use that infinite mana to activate my Jade statue during combat, and for some reason that wins me the game. I want that to be a thing.
I love it. I think we talked a little bit about first main and second main, but second main, this is where the gamers come out, right? Because this is where it's like, hey, I pretended I had a combat trick and attacked you for 1 into your 2/2, but I didn't. And I'm going to play my own creature. There's a lot of stuff that you don't want to do before combat that you want to do after combat. Hey, return a creature, that died this turn. Do that. Maybe I get triggers. Hey, whenever you deal combat damage to opponent, draw a card. I want to cast that card. And I'd like my second main phase to do that.
Yep. And then after the second main phase, probably one of like the most important things about the second main phase relates to the end phase, in that, when you want to leave the second main phase, sometimes people want to stop you before you go to your end of turn because you have some sort of end of turn trigger. Mm-hmm. So sometimes people will stop you in your second main phase, and then you can do something again because both players have to agree to leave the phase.
Yeah.
So that's like probably the weirdest situation that comes up with main phases. But once you get past that situation, everyone agrees to leave the second main phase. Then you go into your end of turn. That is the end phase, which includes the end of turn step. That's where basically you're at the beginning of your end step, do this thing happens. And then you have your cleanup phase, which is this kind of phase where you don't interact in, you don't do anything in, but it just kind of quote unquote cleans up everything that should be happening. If you have more than 7 cards in hand, you discard down. Mm-hmm. Permanents don't have damage on them anymore. End of turn effects, gain control of this creature until end of turn. Those end. You can't do anything. It's just putting the game back together, basically.
Yeah. It kind of like the beginning of combat thing. Like you're saying, I can leave the main phase and everyone gets to do something. And then I can attempt to leave end of turn and everyone still gets to do something. It's funny how sometimes it's like, okay, I want to go to combat. Okay, I'm going to destroy your creature. Oh, it's back in my main phase because you did something during a main phase. I want to go to end of turn. Oh, I'm going to do something. Oh, it's back in my second main phase and I can react again. I can cast sorceries again. You have to sort of wait until this other kind of like more nebulous step in order to like most tactfully, tactically do things.
Would we be remiss if we didn't talk about thawing glaciers during the cleanup step?
We can talk about thawing glaciers if you want.
I always want to talk about thawing glaciers, if I'm being quite honest. I can read the Oracle text here so people can be a little tuned into what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Thawing glaciers enters the battlefield tapped, and then it has 1 tap. Search your library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Return Thawing Glaciers to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next cleanup step. It's like the only card that I think references the cleanup step specifically like that, which is a result of it just being an old card.
Yeah.
Because it said at end of turn, return Thawing Glaciers to your hand.
But not at the end turn step.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so what would happen all the time is people would like activate it on their opponent's end step, and then they'd have Thawing Glaciers untapped on their turn. Cleanup step fixes that, make sure that it catches the Thawing Glaciers before that nonsense happens.
If you were tampering with history, a dangerous prospect, but you decided it was necessary. What would you do to Thawing Glaciers to remove the cleanup step reference?
Oh.
Do we want to have it come back the beginning of the next turn? When do we want to let this thing come back?
We give it phasing.
Should it just be at end of turn so you get it back in your end step so you could hypothetically do something with it there?
Man, how do we fix Thawing Glaciers?
When I was looking it up, there are other things that reference the cleanup step, but they're all cards from like that same era, from Visions, from Mirage.
I don't know how you change it without changing the functionality of the card.
All right. I think ones where it's like even more relevant are some of these like older cards. Like I'm looking at the card Cunning. This is 1 in a blue for enchant creature. And enchanted creature gets +3/+3. So 2 mana enchantment give +3/+3. When enchanted creature attacks or blocks, sacrifice Cunning at the beginning of the next cleanup step. And I think they had to, move this errata in this direction because of damage. Like if it gets sacrificed at the end of turn, the creature could die.
Yeah. How strange.
Yeah. Cleanup step. I think the worst thing about the cleanup step is that the cleanup step is not when things that last until end of turn should end. Those should end when you go into the end turn step. until end of turn. You know, this creature can't do anything until your next main phase. Oh, but not your actual main phase. We mean something different. What? No, you said main phase. You mean main phase. Cleanup and end of turn being separate in terms of how cards are written feels kind of wrong to me. And now we're kind of done our little run through here. Can you remember how many phases are there, and what are they? How many steps in combat are there, and what are they? It is kind of fun to kind of think through these.
And it's a lot. Like, even like going through, like, I'm like, oh yeah, I know what the steps and phases are, and then you kind of go through them again, and you're like, oh my god, yeah. And then there's this thing, and then there's this thing. What happens during this thing? Why does this thing exist?
Yeah. All right, so now we're kind of opened up. We're all refreshed. We all remember everything. And what are we actually changing? What other things could we mess with? What's on your mind?
Yeah, I think we talked about some of these.
Yeah.
Grouping the main phases together was something I thought about. One main phase. Even like doing would combat work if you could enter combat at any point and you could enter combat multiple times?
Yeah, that's something that people talk about because that's other games let you do that kind of thing.
Yeah. And like, I attack with this creature. Now I'm going to attack with this creature.
Yeah,
and you could still do the same combat steps.
Yeah, and I think one of the misunderstandings that I thought that I've heard people talk about is like not quite understanding that you can't do that, and then also you resolve a Sarah Angel, and now your opponent dies the next turn because you just attack with a flying vigilance creature 5 times and they take 20 damage.
Yeah, you need some sort of rider on there. Each creature can only attack once a turn. We don't want to reorder the phases in such a way that we get rid of vigilance. That is the point of this exercise.
Yeah. All right, so here's what we do. Whenever an opponent attacks, untap this creature. That's what vigilance says.
Oh, there you go.
Vigilance? Well, what does vigilance mean? It means that like when something happens, you're ready to react. What might that be? Your opponent attacking.
The only thing is, though, you also lose out on the dodging the tapped removal in white, Destroy target tapped creature. Now my vigilance creature gets destroyed by
finally vulnerable.
That spell.
Yeah.
No.
So multiple combats in a row.
You also have to then change the wording on those extra combat spell. Like, take an additional combat step after this would then become like any number of target creatures can attack an additional time or something. Still feels doable, but.
And I would say that like the extra combat step sorceries have existed in a weird spot, like play pattern wise. Did I say the forbidden term, play pattern? Where like they tend to be just like flat out game enders and commander, and they tend to be never played anywhere else.
Yeah.
So losing that technology maybe is not like losing like a really crucial magic thing. I don't know, compared to vigilance, which is a crucial magic thing.
There's like a small handful of red players. They're like screaming right now.
That's fine. I could take that. Yeah. I'm at 32. I could take a couple hits.
I'm intrigued by the idea of Magic dumping the draw step.
That draw just happens, or do you want nobody drawing, or do
no
you just
drawing?
Want drawing?
Yeah,
oh, okay.
you only you have to pay to draw. Like change the value. Basically, it changes the value of a card intrinsically. Like if you want to draw, you gotta earn it. You have to cast a spell. The problem that you get into though is that like if you have an opening hand of 7 cards that can't draw a card, then that is the 7 cards you have to try and win the game, which is not really feasible. You really have to like change either how Magic is balanced completely, or change. Like you have to build in a way to draw a card somehow.
Let's take some stabs.
If you want to draw a card, you have to take a point of infect. Was my first thought. So you have this
whenever
separate resource.
You play a land, draw a card.
Ooh, Horn of Greed style.
So top decking lands is no longer a problem. We get straight to some action. You still need some other card draw in a deck because you basically have 7 starting spells. If 4 of them are lands, 3 of them are spells. And playing your 4 lands eventually draws you to the other spells. You get 7 spells this game. You need other ways to draw cards because 7 spells is usually not enough spells to play a full game of Magic. But now you also have a new balance tool because cantrips become a lot more relevant and interesting because you need to have some number of them in order to have a functioning deck. Or you just go all out. I only need 7 spells to win a game.
I'm going to draw these 7 spells every time.
7 lightning bolts. Let's do it.
What deck archetype do you think, excluding the deck that just wants to play extra land, prime time. I just want to play a bunch of lands every turn. Like, what deck archetype gets better if playing a land draws me a card? Does control get better? Does aggro get better because now my lands aren't as terrible of draws?
Anything where the cards in your deck are... The cards in your opening hand are great, and then you just need to make sure you don't flood out in order to execute your game plan. Yeah, it feels kind of like aggro is a little more advantage there. I could be wrong. It feels aggro-y, though.
That's where I was leaning to.
Because, 7 lightning bolts. I'm just going to guess.
Exactly. Yeah, the only reason I ever lose as an aggro deck is because I top decked a land when I needed to top deck a spell.
I guess you're flooded. You could get flooded temporarily still, because you could play your land and draw another land, which you can't play yet, but you will eventually get through it. We're not quite yet putting on the table playing more lands per turn or something like that. We're not tinkering with that yet.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking about is going the opposite direction. The other common thing that you see in a lot of games is at the end of turn, refill your hand. How does Magic change if... Okay, you don't draw a card at the beginning of your turn, but the end of turn, you replenish all the cards that you played. So you draw back up to 7.
Well, 7 would be crazy. You'd need your cards to be a lot simpler if you could have 7 in hand.
If you say so.
Cheap cards get better, or many cheap cards get better. Expensive cards feel like they have to be a lot more powerful to be worth it. Ramp is a lot better. If I play my mana rock and I get my card back afterward, that's the dream. You kind of need fewer cards, and then if you have fewer cards, I don't know, that doesn't totally feel magic-y. I'm not sequencing anymore. I'm not holding up as many things.
What do you think feels the more interest? So you would probably say drawing no cards is the more interesting line.
I would say it's more interesting. It would require more changes, but it's more interesting.
Limited resources rather than being able to just almost get away with doing anything you want.
Once you can play multiple cards every turn, something like that, then I don't know, the board gets more full. You have more, can't really deal with more than like 8 creatures on your side at a time without your brain blowing up. I guess if creatures die more often. I was thinking of another one that what if all the things in beginning phase happened with no interaction and just dumped all their triggers onto first main phase? If you want to pay upkeep costs, well, guess what? You already saw the card you drew for the turn.
My first thought with that is it instantly simplifies one of the harder steps in Magic, I would say. Like the beginning of phase is just something that, like, once you do it a billion times, you don't really think about how annoying it is and how tedious it is. But it's tedious for new players, and it's like a hurdle to learn. And then there's just like the thing you lose is just that little bit of like skill testing where, I can time something to do it on the upkeep rather than, on my second main phase. And I just get like a little bit more information, or I force my opponent to take some sort of action
before you see your draw.
Yeah.
I guess one of the things that happens all the time, and even happens if you played 1,000 games of Magic, is drawing before you untap. Or trying to do something in your main phase before you draw. Like these are things that are like really common. Untapping is not exciting. Drawing is exciting. I want to do that first. That's just like naturally the thing that you want to do. But you should be untapping first. You should allow your opponent to do anything during upkeep. Nobody does, but they should. Or the game is telling them they should. And then you draw afterward.
It is one of the like hardest things to actually like put into practice. So the other one that is like the most hard to put into practice as like a physical understanding is like enters combat. Once again, this was kind of clarified during Kaladesh, where it was like, when you say combat ? I feel like Magic players have done this 100 times, right? Combat? And then your opponent goes, yep. And then you declare your attackers. But that combat ? is your entering combat step. But upkeep is like so much harder to police in that, because you kind of go untap, upkeep, draw. You're moving to draw, like you said, really fast. Your opponent kind of has to sit there and wait, like, oh, I have something I want to do, but I don't want them to know that I have something I want to do. So it's like almost you have to bluff a little bit.
Yeah.
If your opponent has something to do on your end step, and then you're like on your upkeep, and they're like, well, I'm still in your end step, that's a whole nother can of worms.
Pull back, yeah. What if we had like untap and draw are non-interactive, and then we have a start of turn step?
Ooh.
To go with end of turn.
Okay, let's just think about moving upkeep to after draw, because that's essentially what you're doing. Is it if we move upkeep to after draw, does anyone actually care about the upkeep step? Other than like as a place to store triggers, I guess.
Yeah, because that's sort of what upkeep is a place to store triggers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You have sort of this a much more graceful thing to do at the start of the turn, which is like you rip your card, you start untap, and you say start of turn, and then your opponent can either say, "Whoop, before your main phase, black, I'm going to blow up your guy," or go ahead.
Would anyone blow up a guy at the start of turn before the main phase?
Well, the thing is, once the problem with the thing I suggested earlier of just like making the entire beginning phase non-interactive is that means that people get to cast sorceries before you can do anything.
Okay, yeah.
Once you're in your main phase, like your opponent gets to, the person whose main phase it is gets to do a thing before anyone can respond. Whereas having this, late upkeep or start of turn step or whatever you want to call it, whichever of those you still have a chance to say, you drew a card, I want to hit you with this discard effect to see what it was. I want to click you.
Yep. I want to lightning bolt your mana dude.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I'm into it. Send it off. Wizards fix it. The only thing you're missing is that brief window where it's like losing the knowledge. Like, kind of talking through it, a lot of the phases here are built around like the manipulation of knowledge. So like, oh, my opponent doesn't know something, and I don't get to miss out on doing that thing. I get to hide it from my opponent and then do it after my opponent has to make decisions. That's kind of what the upkeep has over this like proposed start of turn idea. Is that it still includes like this one little piece of hidden information. My opponent doesn't know what's on top of their deck and has to make a decision without that.
It's called upkeep, but maybe people sometimes want to have to make a decision before they draw. I had like a kind of an escape variant that I played for a while that you had to decide to do it during your upkeep. And there were old cards that did this too. Like you only activate this during your upkeep. Effects that make you choose something before you draw. I kind of just like decided that I'm not super interested in that tension, like that specific thing. Drawing is just such a automatic activity that telling people to like stop doing that. Don't draw yet. It's just like, it's not worth making like every game in this limited environment, everyone is stopping before their draw step because they have to choose this, graveyard mechanic if they're going to do it.
It is also just like the not fun thing. I think what is the intuitive thing? What is the fun thing? What is the intuitive thing that every player wants to do is they want to untap and draw their card. What is the fun thing that every player wants to do? Untap and draw their card.
Yeah.
The upkeep's not the fun part of the beginning phase.
I think that's a good thing to apply to some of these other steps, because one of the things we talked about during combat is like, is it intuitive that everyone does something in between declare attackers and blockers, that I don't just jam them together and, make blocks right away? It's not intuitive. People want to assign their blockers right away. Is it fun? Actually, it kind of is. But like, there's no like, it's not quite like an ambush if I, hit someone in their upkeep before they draw. It's just like I don't know, make a decision now.
So what do you think the most fun phase in Magic is?
Draw. That's what we're saying, right? Or phase.
Yeah. It has to be the whole phase.
Is playing cards or attacking with cards more fun? I don't know.
So here's my theory. Here's my theory: is every Magic player starts out with first main phase is the most fun. I get to cast all my spells. That's what I want to do. I want to cast spells. That's why I'm playing Magic. And the longer you play, the more likely you are to shift to combat. Like, I feel like once you hit like that 5-year mark, the only thing that gives you joy in Magic anymore is the combat step. All you want to do is attack with a 2/2. Every Magic player is just headed towards that outcome.
Yeah, you don't ever want Magic to get too separated from the combat phase. Like if you don't have combat in Magic, if too many games don't have combat, if combat doesn't matter that much, you invalidate a whole lot of cards.
Yeah.
When it's only a game of resources and not a game of bluffing and guessing what's going to happen. I don't know.
I think it's also why entrenched Magic players tend to shift towards limited. Like, there's 1,000 factors of why entrenched Magic players shift towards limited. But I think one of them is just that combat is always interesting and fresh and never totally the same. But there's also these like nice rules that you can kind of follow in combat to think about.
Yeah.
Combat always has this excitement of I don't totally know what's going to happen when I do this.
Yeah.
I'm going to attack with these two creatures. I think they're going to block like this. But if they block like this, then I can do this. But maybe they'll do this. Like, there's just so many unknowns. And I think that's what makes it exciting.
And we want to drive more designs and mechanics into that moment. If we're talking about, creature cards or creature mechanics for a set, like we want to think like, can this change the decision making mid combat and not just like, is this creature good? Like, is this creature big enough? Is this creature have some other value? Well, those are okay, but can things shift during combat that make this different? Like Menace is a weird name for an effect. It came kind of like halfway through Magic's lifespan, but gameplay wise, it's great. It actually drives a lot into combat. Like it makes like the number of blockers that you have really relevant. It makes when the Menace creature declares attacks, now I want to be able to flash something in.
Okay. Here we go. Extreme change.
Okay.
Get rid of every phase of Magic except the combat phase. We only have combat.
I have cards in my hand. I'm going to put some number of them into play at the beginning of combat.
Exactly.
Some of them will be able to attack and some of them won't.
That's kind of what Flesh and Blood is, honestly.
Oh, okay. I haven't played Flesh and Blood. I need to try
Flesh and Blood is just the combat. I kind of compare Flesh and Blood to like, I think what Flesh and Blood is trying to mimic is like fighting games. When I'm on my turn, I'm trying to like do my back, left, forward, high punch, low punch, uppercut combo. And then my opponent is trying to react to block that. And that involves, so like you have like a hero and your hero is like your creature, basically. You don't really have other creatures. And then your spells all like affect your hero's attack that they do on their turn. Your hero basically takes an attack on your turn and your spells all affect that attack. And there's a little bit more nuance to that, but essentially that's the core premise.
Yeah, I'll have to pick that up at some time. I just haven't. By design, there's no digital version of it, so I just need to be in the right mindset and be with the right people to pick it up.
Yeah, I was lucky that I just had a friend who's like, I kind of want to get into this, and I'm like, well, I'm actually interested. So if you buy the cards, I'll play with you.
How simultaneous can we make turns? We all draw. We've made the entire beginning phase non-interactive. So we all untap and draw. We take a main phase in order. Or maybe you take one main phase action in turn order. I could play a land. Okay. Then I have to pass after doing that. And then, it'll go around, and once everyone passes, then we head to combat.
An end turn you can do at the same time. Everyone's end turn triggers go. The stack gets messy when everyone takes a turn simultaneously.
Well, that's why if I cast a sorcery, that sorcery has to. That's why we have an order. It's not fully simultaneous. I declare I want to cast Rampant Growth. Then people can cast instant still, but like, in this
But like somebody casts a board wipe, destroys all the creatures.
Okay,
who orders the death triggers?
It's the same as it is now. I don't know. Active player. I guess you have to define instead of active player. There's just the numbers. Whoever's numbers 1 puts their triggers on the stack first, and 2 puts them on.
Okay.
3 all the way to 5.
That's where you have the starting player token that gets passed around.
Yeah, you don't have active player, non-active player. You just have numbered players.
Yep.
Yeah. Combat is all at the same time.
Is this better for multiplayer? Is this more fun for multiplayer because everyone's like doing their turns, so you don't have to wait so long to take your turn?
It really creates an impetus on like not having the non-combat things be that long. Because everyone has to basically pay attention the whole time. Like in a commander game, it's possible sometimes where like You finish your turn, you're tapped out, and you go get a snack or a drink or something. And like maybe someone kills your creature, and you just say, "Just tell me about it when I get back." You can not care about it. But when you have a fully wound order, like you're going round and round. Now you really have to pay attention the whole time.
I don't hate it. I'd try it once.
Yeah.
Try it once. What do you think? You got any takeaways from this? Did we get anything productive from this conversation?
Cleanup step is misnamed. Upkeep step is obsoletely named.
Draw step is the most fun step. Combat phase is the most fun phase.
End of combat, I tried to mount a defense for, but I cannot justify. Entering combat, you're a big fan of. There needs to be a priority pass in between main phases and when I crew my vehicles. There needs to be a hard wall. We're not going back to main phase. Declare attackers and blockers. It takes people a little while to learn that, but I'm even more convinced of their value. That people get priority between combat damage and end of combat was a surprise to me. I didn't know that off the top of my head. Yeah, I think we learned a lot.
Definitely learned a lot about the phases. And honestly, I think the big takeaway is like all of this works pretty well. All of this feels like it has a reason. Maybe the one mistake was untap, upkeep, draw. Should just be untap, draw. Start my turn. I like that proposal.
Alrighty, so that's it for our. I guess we've left our phase, our hardcore phase rules phase. We're phasing out. And they're called phase and we have phasing. That's also a problem. We didn't get to that before. But before we get out of here, we want to give you guys all your chance to interact with phases or anything else you want to in Magic with our design challenge. We got our November one.
Challenge for November is Going Nova. Take an existing instant or sorcery card and make a creature that can cast that card once. Our bonus points are Nothing Gold Can Stay, make the base card monocolor, and then Vampire Weekend, a life payment is required somewhere.
The main thing that I have asked people to kind of think about for this challenge is the flexibility that you have in the so a creature can cast that card once. How do you make it so they're allowed to cast that thing once? Are they allowed to cast it once because it's like a monstrous effect, that specifically says only do this once? Is it the creature sacrifices itself? Is there's some other way for this creature is able to cast this card? It can giant growth, but it can't giant growth just with a tap ability. It can't do it every turn. Figure out how you're going to make it so that this creature saying, "My life for ire. I'm going all out. I'm really just like doing the best thing that I can do as a creature, the coolest ability that I can cast as a creature." Have you done a card for this yet? I've been trying to. I try to stay in the dark on these cards before the recording, but
no, I have not touched it. My first step, though, while I was looking, because I was pretty prepared for this kind of question, was what are some cards that are instants and sorceries that represent? What are some instants and sorceries that reference phases? Moment of Silence stood out to me. Target player skips his or her combat phase, but then I realized Stonehorn Dignitary already exists. I'd have to one-up Stonehorn Dignitary.
I recently acquired a Time Stop, end the turn.
Ooh, there you go.
It's a card I never had the guts to cast in Limited, but I now own one, and I wish to cast it in a Commander game against somebody. I don't know how it's going to feel yet. We're just going to find out. Whatever you want to do, and the combat step. Combat's over. You can go to your main phase, but we have a ceasefire here.
The combat step is over. I don't like how this is going for me. We're done. Move on.
End the main phase.
End the upkeep for good. Permanently.
Destroy target creature. Then pass priority.
Destroy target phase. That opponent no longer has that phase.
Alrighty. Well, if you want to get a card in, November 29th is your last time to do that. But that'll be it for our podcast for the week. Discord's where the action is. You Make the Pack is still going strong. People doing stuff for that. Jump in for that, and I'm sure we'll have something new also popping up soon. Thanks for joining me as always, M-Dub. You got any movies you want to pop?
Ooh, I have not prepared for this question, but you know what? I won't do a movie this time. I'm feeling very like a biddy today, I guess.
Okay.
Looking at phases for the design challenge.
All right.
How about an album that I really liked?
Oh.
Morning Phase. Maybe we can introduce a new phase to Magic, Morning Phase. It's an album by Beck. It came out back when I was in college, but
okay.
I really liked it. I think he won something for it.
Oh, okay.
Maybe. Album of the Year, 57 Annual Grammy Award, Album of the Year, Best Engineered Album, Non-Classical,
Holy cow.
Best Rock Album.
I listened to Sea Change a lot, but I don't think I ever listened to Morning Phase.
Definitely check it out. I like it. It's good. It definitely is like Saturday morning. It's getting cool now. I love cold.
Got too cold too fast.
Yeah, cold cup of coffee Saturday morning. They're on Morning Phase.
I like this. You're pivoting. You're becoming a music expert.
I'll pivot back. This is an exception. All right, we'll get another movie ready to go soon.
Give us the morning phase to the morning step to handle vampire or werewolf changes.
Oh, there you go.
That's
the
extra phase we're adding.
Yeah.
All right. If you need to talk to either of us about stuff, the Discord is the place to do it. I'm at Tim F. Riley there. You're on a whiteboarder. Thanks everybody for listening.
This is now the end phase of the podcast. This is we're in cleanup now, probably.